Most novelists want to communicate some sort of ideas in their fiction, but they don't really know how to do it. And there are lots of really bad ways to do this, like your book slips into more non-fiction or people just get bored with the ideas. So what we're going to do today is go over 8 different ways you can communicate ideas in fiction in a way that charms the reader rather than puts the reader off. The first technique that we're going to look at is a combination of dialogue and action. And for an example of how to do this, look at Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. This is a book with an extremely strong anti-consumerist message. And so the dialogue ends up doing a lot of the work communicating these ideas. The things you own end up owning you. Reject the basic assumptions of civilization, especially the importance of material possessions. We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. Or check out this one. You are not your job. You're not how much money you have in the bank. You are not the car you drive. So the way that ideas are communicated in this novel is the first step is they tear down or verbally critique materialism.
I'd flip through catalogs and wonder, what kind of dining set defines me as a person?
But the second step is really to take action on those ideas. What do the characters actually do in this book? Well, for starters, according to the title, they do start this underground fight club. It's primal, it's physical, it's animalistic. There are no rankings between rich people or poor people. All you have is people scrapping in a ring.
How about next week? How about next month?
But the second step they take is far more extreme. It goes into this anarchist idea where they decide to bomb all of the credit card buildings. And they're trying to erase records of wealth so we can return to a more non-materialistic lifestyle. But the most common mistake that writers make when they try this technique is they end up writing far too much about the ideas, right? They'll write for like a page or 2 pages, like really expounding on the ideas. But instead, what Chuck Palahniuk does is he just has these like really powerful one-liners here and there that are just savage critiques of capitalism and consumerism and materialism.
Consumers? Right. We are consumers. We are byproducts of a lifestyle obsession.
But I think it's also really important not to stop there, but also have your characters do things that show the backbone behind what they actually believe. And by the way, this is the very last week to sign up for Bookfox Lab. We are starting a new cohort. So if you want to work with professional authors who can give you great feedback on your book and meet with you one-on-one to help you through the process of writing or revising your book, now is the time. In January, we did run out of spots and we had to turn people away. So apply now if you're at all interested. I would love to work with you on your book and help you make it a success. The second way to incorporate ideas into your fiction is to have ideas represented by societies. For this example, we're going to look at a Ursula K. Le Guin book, The Dispossessed, an Ambiguous Utopia. So in this book, she shows a bunch of different countries, each with different political systems. You have Thu, which is authoritarian. You have Benbili, which is unstable, sort of representing the third world. You have the wealthy country of Alo, which is pretty much the West or Western countries. But the most interesting one is the Moon, Anna-Rees, which is this anarchist government, sort of no government at all. And I think the main thrust of this book was to show that all the political systems that we have aren't great ones and that an anarchist utopia might be a better option than all of them. Now, if you want to pull something off like this in your book, you don't have to create entire nations like she did. You can create groups of people. You can create households. You could create tribes, any sort of different group that can symbolize a particular idea and then set those groups against each other to sort of see who wins the ideological battle. In the end, she doesn't hold back from critiquing a lot of the different political systems out there, including some critiques for the anarchist system as well. I'd also like to say, even if there's a particular idea in your book that you're trying to have the book promote, it's not a bad idea to stop for a moment and critique it. And I think Ursula Le Guin does that by offering some critiques of the anarchist system as well, because otherwise it comes off as a little bit too cheesy, and too rah-rah and cheerleady. You actually do want to spend a moment or two and acknowledge some faults with whatever sort of idea that you're promoting. It'll make your book seem more honest. A third strategy for including ideas in your fiction would be the opposition idea. These are books where you're not exactly arguing for an idea as much as you're arguing against an idea. And here's how you write a book like this. 1, you pick an idea that you really, really, really dislike. And then what you do is you create a world, maybe set in the future or set on a different planet or set in a fantasy world, where you show the repercussions of what that idea leads to, a sort of, dystopia. And really, Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale is a great example of this. She just asked the question okay, what happens when women's bodies are the property of the state or the church, and what happens when women's only value is as incubation vessels. She really shows you in the book how terrible things can get for women if these ideas are followed to their logical conclusion. And I've always loved that small detail of when Offred saves a little pat of butter from dinner because she's not allowed any sort of lotion of any type, and she just uses the pat of butter to lotion up her hands afterwards. Margaret Atwood is saying, look, if you follow these ideas, women are going to be denied even the basic luxury of hand lotion. So the advantage of putting ideas in your fiction like this is that you're not relying upon like explicit arguments inside the text. You're really allowing the story itself to communicate what the points are. A fourth great way you can put ideas in your fiction is characters as ideas. You could make the argument that beginning writers are a little bit more likely to state ideas directly in their fiction, while writers with a little more experience under their belt tend to embody their ideas in actual people. Look at Kristen Hanna's The Nightingale. It's a story about World War II, and it's arguing for the importance of female heroism in wartime. One of the most important steps for this point is to make sure you also have a character who opposes this idea in your novel. For instance, in The Nightingale, there's a character who says that women are basically useless in war. What it does, one, is it riles up the readers like, oh man, I'm sure this guy is wrong. And then two, it gives the characters in the novel something to fight against, something to prove themselves against. So the novel shows two French sisters proving that women are essential in wartime. Isabelle, who helps more than 100 Allied airmen escape over the mountains, and Vianne, who hides Jewish children from the Nazis. And in the end, these two characters are the living proof that that guy at the beginning of the novel who said women are useless in war is wrong, right? They obviously were incredibly useful and were very heroic. And this is an idea that Kristen Hanna loves. She did the same sort of message or argument in her book, The Women, about the role of nurses in the Vietnam War. And if you found any of the ideas in this video helpful, subscribing is how you tell YouTube that you want to see more videos like this. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. The fifth way to incorporate ideas in your novel is people as mouthpieces. So the last point was about people embodying certain ideas. This one is when characters are speaking certain ideas. And to pull this one off, I'd recommend that you have at least two characters in a novel, you can't have more, that are the mouthpieces for certain ideas. And usually it's best if these two characters are advocating for different ideas. For an example of this, we're gonna look at Michel Houellebecq's The Elementary Particles. This is a book about two wildly different brothers, and the author is saying that these are the type of people that our society creates. They're kind of archetypes. Bruno has this desperate animalistic craving for physical intimacy, and Michel is this scientist who is very cold and abstracted and logical. Bruno is an example of unchecked hedonism. All he wants is sex. That's 100% of his mental processes are aimed at that. So he's a character who has freedom, but doesn't really have like a higher purpose in life. And Michel, his brother, is this molecular biologist who's very like logical and abstract and like 100% a thinker. He's always existing in his own brain. He is unable to love. He's barely able to be present in his own life. He's someone who sort of represents the Enlightenment ideal. Bruno is someone who suffers with too much wanting, while Michel, on the other hand, has a complete absence of wanting anything. Now, throughout the book, both these characters speak at length, sometimes for long paragraphs, sometimes for 2 or 3 pages at a time, especially when they get together, sort of talking through their particular view of life and what's wrong with it and why things aren't working. And what I think is really interesting is that the end of the book, Michel Houellebecq really doesn't say either one of these characters are right or either one of these characters are better. Really, they're kind of both mistakes that modern people make when they choose how to live in the world. And so the end of the book is about choosing a third, better option, something that's post-human. And Houellebecq does a great job letting both of these characters be the mouthpieces and constantly advocate for what they think is the best way to live, but also their struggles to live well. I really like this next idea. It is a lot of fun to try out. It is number 6, the inversion technique. To use this technique in your book, what you do is you present a premise at the beginning of your book, and then later on, the rest of the book kind of inverts or subverts that initial premise. So let's look at Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which was made into the movie Blade Runner.
Someone gives you a calfskin wallet.
I wouldn't accept it.
Now, this is a story that starts off by telling us, hey, what makes us human, what separates us from the robots is empathy. And so, you have Harrison Ford giving this test to someone he doesn't know whether it's a human or a robot. It's an empathy test to try to figure out whether this robot is indeed a robot.
It's a test designed to provoke an emotional response.
But what's really interesting is that the entire rest of the book questions this division between humans and robots. Because plenty of people are really unempathetic in this book. Plenty of humans, right? And you're like, wait a second, if humans are supposed to be empathetic, if that's what divided us from the machines, then how come they don't seem very empathetic? And then on the other hand, you see plenty of androids who end up being very sympathetic toward other androids, being very empathetic toward their own kind.
We need you, Sebastian. You're our best and only friend.
And so by the end of the book, you're really skeptical of this empathy being the dividing line between humans and robots. You're like, I'm not sure that's true. So to do this for your book, figure out what you want to say and then start at the opposite end. Start with a completely different idea that you can then undermine in order to get to your idea. This is the same idea as a character arc, right? You figure out where your character is going to be at the end of your book, and then you start with them in a completely different place so they have somewhere to go. It allows your book to feel like it's moving and not just like the static idea from beginning to end, just like hammering it into the reader's head. The seventh one, honestly, is the hardest one to pull off, but I'm still going to mention it. It is direct ideas. These are books of ideas that has an omniscient narrator directly philosophizing to the reader. So take, for example, Milan Kundera's The Unbearable Lightness of Being. Just take a look at the beginning 2 paragraphs of this book. This is thick philosophical stuff, right? This doesn't seem like fiction. We're not starting with a character. We're not starting with a scene, a particular environment. No, we're talking solely about abstract ideas, the idea of lightness, the idea of weight, the idea of Nietzsche's eternal return. Now, the trick is you can't stay in that sort of non-fictional philosophy type mode forever, right? That's a short couple of pages, and then you transition into characters who are embodying those philosophical ideas. Freedom versus responsibility, lightness versus weight. I do think that this is a technique that a lot of beginning authors fall into most easily when they're thinking about putting ideas into their novel, but that's kind of a shame because honestly, this is the hardest one to pull off well, and it's not one I would recommend if this is your first novel. It's difficult to pull off well because you can really risk losing readers' attention if you're just straight up talking about like big ideas and abstract ideals. And the danger is you lose connection, the human connection with the character. You want the reader to just connect emotionally with the characters you have. I think another author who often falls into this is Ayn Rand, right? Atlas Shrugged, The Fountainhead, where she has a lot of like very direct ideas. Usually she's couching it, as character dialogue, but like you can kind of see through it. You're like, Ayn Rand, I know this is secretly you. And now let's get to our very last way to put ideas into your fiction, and this is story as argument. And for this one, it's basically the way that you're telling the story and how the story unfolds is kind of making a certain type of argument. A great example of this would be No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. And what I really like about this book is I feel like it has a journey where it escalates across several different ideas, at least 3 separate different ideas. So the first one is you have Anton sort of as an instrument of fate. He's flipping this coin to determine who lives and who dies. And what this is saying is fate is coming for all of us, right? And he is just merely the instrument of that fate. Now, the second idea in the novel, I'd say, is when Anton is going to kill the wife of one of his opponents, and she says,
The coin don't have no say. It's just you.
So what she does is says, no. It's not really fate, some sort of abstract big ideal out there that people are getting killed for. No. You have to take personal responsibility. It is you, Anton, who are killing people. And honestly, this is a pure Cormac idea, the idea that humans are prone to violence and humans will never stop being violent. But then the last stage of the argument that Cormac makes is there is a moment where Anton is just driving down the street and he just gets T-boned by this car, just brutalized. So what does this car crash reveal to us as readers? We realize, he's not this, devil-like creature who is an instrument of fate. He is subject to fate like the rest of us, right? He could get randomly hit by a car just like any one of us could suffer incredible violence tomorrow or today. Violence is something that just occurs in the world all the time. It's unavoidable. And if you've read a lot of Cormac McCarthy, you know that this is a theme he talks about often in his books. I mean, blood meridian. I mean, he's saying that violence is just an omnipresent feature of life. So what are your takeaways if you want to do this for your book? Is that you can think about having a sequence of ideas. You don't have to be like, this is the one idea I want to communicate in my book. You can like start with one idea, present one idea, and then have it evolve to something in the middle, and then switcheroo or change it by the end by showing how the story is unfolding. When he gets hit by that car, there's no omniscient narrator saying anything. There's no dialogue from the characters. It's just an event. All right, I hope that helps you. Hey, do not forget to apply to Bookfox Lab. This is your last chance. And I hope this video really helped you with how to incorporate ideas in different ways inside your novel. Happy writing.